The sad thing about those who start watching wrestling today is that they may never know what it feels like to watch wrestling when it's truly the biggest thing going. To watch the biggest stars of them all, the Austins, Watts, Flairs and Hogans swaggering around like they actually own the world. When the crowd for every show, every week is hotter than hell, warring everyone on instead of sitting on their hands. When literally everybody in the schoolyard is doing crotch chops and the class idiot gets in trouble for flipping a teacher off because he saw Stone Cold do it on TV. That was the Attitude Era. 1999. It was a glorious time when wrestling was everywhere. In Herndon, Virginia, with wrestling at the height of its commercial power, a man had the idea to get in on the wrestling business and won a pay-per-view show featuring legendary grapplers from the annals of sports entertainment. A Champions Tour, if you will. A senior circuit. The main event of the first show would feature a drunken and drugged-up man writhing around the ring with a hired snake on top of him as he licked his head. It was the cherry on top of the worst pay-per-view of all time.
You know, in the wrestling business, you get to the top by your body count. George the Animal Steele is the one man that is certifiably insane.
It's all going to be all over for you, George Steele. You're going to lay down and die. I'm going to put the finger four leg lock on you. And Sherry, I'm going to walk out with you, baby.
Because I'm going to tell you, Stan, 10 years is bubbled up inside me. 10 years all of a sudden at one time is bubbled up inside me.
I am the original gangster of love. I tip the scales at 228 3/4 pounds. I am Sweet Stan Lee.
My man can suplex from his knees, brother. He's so good, so fine. He's so sweet. This is the man of the hour, the man of the power. I'm Captain Lou, and I'm telling to you, look out, look out, look out, Bob Orton, because we're ready, baby. We're ready.
But I'll tell you what you have done. You've got the Cowboys dander up. Can't wait to step in the ring with you, Snuka. And Albano, stick your nose in there one time. I'll slap you, boy.
I don't have a problem with Jake the Snake Roberts, but this isn't the San Diego Zoo. I don't want to see any giraffes, or rhinoceroses, or pythons, or cobras.
That is not what you need to worry about, Anvil. The bottom line is this. When the DDT comes, then the snake comes out. Worry about the DDT.
Wrestling on TV is all about the supercard, the pay-per-view, where the big feuds and storylines are hopefully going to come to some sort of resolution. A great supercard is one hell of a ride, 3 to 4 hours of solid entertainment that just makes you feel good. A bad supercard can be a soul-crushing experience filled with disappointment after disappointment that makes you wish you'd never been a wrestling fan to begin with. There are many famous bad pay-per-views. There's WrestleMania 9 with its Toga Party, WCW's torturous Great American Bash 91, that one WWE show where half the roster couldn't wrestle due to elevated liver enzymes, or basically anything that WCW ran in the year 2000. These are awful, often comically bad shows. However, the show we're looking at today, Heroes of Wrestling, makes all of them look like the absolute best of the best by comparison. Compared to this show, The Undertaker vs Giant Gonzalez may as well be Rock vs Austin at WrestleMania 17. Many have looked at the show already. Much like playing the legendary shit games of the Japanese Famicom, the Takeshi no Senjus and Super Monkey Daibokens, watching Heroes of Wrestling is a true sign that you've been around. You're seasoned. You know what the hell you're talking about. I may be one of the only people in the world who has consciously watched the whole thing more than once. For most, that's enough. But this is the most curious show of them all, and I cannot help but wonder just how things could go so badly. In 1966, a lawnmower salesman named Halby Warren took a bet that he couldn't make a movie, and he ended up making Manos the Hands of Fate, quite possibly the worst, most incompetent movie ever made. Heroes of Wrestling is its closest equivalent, not just for how bad it is, but for the story behind it.
Legendary grudge matches will finally be settled in the Heroes of Wrestling.
October 1999 was a pretty busy period for wrestling in general. A lot of different things happened. This was a time when the WWF were definitely riding high. War was pulling in ratings in the high 5s and low 6s just about every week, as was SmackDown, their second show which had launched in April of that year. October also saw the sad death of a wrestling icon, as well as the sad paralysis of a WWF prospect by the name of Darren Drozdov, perhaps most notable for the He's Gonna Puke scene in the documentary Beyond the Mat, which we'll be looking at again later. The big news of the month, however, was that WWF's head writer Vince Russo had jumped ship to WCW. WCW are now struggling in the ratings, with Nitro only pulling in close to half of what WWF Raw did. At the time, Vince Russo was one of the main men credited with the WWF's Attitude Era that had made them such a huge success, and people were wondering if he'd be able to turn things around for them. Meanwhile, ECW, the third brand, are still trying to establish their show on TNN, which launched only a few weeks previously. So that's where things are at generally, and it's in this very hot market that Heroes of Wrestling is trying to make a name. Anyway, meet Bill Stone, the head of his own production company, Fostone Productions. Stone's no rookie or anything. His career is based on sporting events, mostly on the college circuit, as well as concerts. He packages them. Around this time, he was also involved in producing Tough Man and Tough Woman events, amateur boxing scraps that were popular at the time. Wrestling fans may remember the infamous Brawl for All in 1998, where WWF tried to piggyback on the popularity of Tough Man at the time. Bill Stone decided that he wanted to get into producing pay-per-views for himself, and so naturally he picked wrestling as his vehicle. Makes sense. Wrestling is a regular pay-per-view seller after all, especially at this time. There is one small fly in the ointment, mind you. Bill Stone himself does not know a whole lot about wrestling. It's not really his thing. He was a fan as a kid, but not much more. However, he does what any smart person would do. He gets involved with people who do know about wrestling. When it comes to the show itself, people who know wrestling can handle the booking, planning side of it, while Stone handles locations, production and promotion, the stuff he's good at. It is in the initial meeting where the idea for Heroes of Wrestling forms. To make this pay-per-view sellable as a wrestling show, obviously some recognisable talent is going to be needed. So why not bring in old names from the past? Folks that people will recognise and will be happy to see again. That should certainly help the buy rate. Stone also felt that a lot of the big names of the past weren't necessarily getting the respect they deserved, with wrestling being as popular as it was, and so wanted to put the card on as a big nostalgia trip, to give them another way back into the big dance. One slight issue here, mind you, is that at this time, well, most of the legends who'd immediately spring to mind actually still have jobs in either WWF or particularly WCW, which is absolutely chock-a-block with ex-WWF guys. There's still plenty out there to fill up a card, of course, but a lot of the big name talent, let's say Hulk Hogan, is utterly out of the question. With this in mind, Bill Stone set a modest goal for the first Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view. Present it as a one-time only event, with plans for more to come, and a target of 40,000 buys, a buy rate of 0.1. By way of comparison, in October 1999, WWF drew 327,835 buys for No Mercy, WCW 202,945 for Halloween Havoc, and ECW 89,209 for Anarchy Rules, all in the same month that Heroes of Wrestling would end up winning in. Heroes of Wrestling was not meant to compete with the big boys. Even competing against ECW was hardly feasible. No one saw it as any real competition, and Bill Stone's hope was more that the first event could get the ball rolling, attract some interest, and hopefully grow from there. It's worth talking about the promotion of the event a little bit, as this is one of the few things that Heroes of Wrestling actually managed to get right. They did manage to get a good bit of money injected into the event, around about $350,000 is the quoted figure, which was huge for an independent wrestling show at the time. Over 3,000 cable and satellite systems carried the show, with a combined reach of 41 million subscribers, as well as a delayed broadcast in the UK on ITV. The show was sold at $20, $10 less than the usual price of a boxing or wrestling pay-per-view, and they managed to get adverts in for the show during both WWF and WCW programming. They had their own website, which is sadly lost to time, as well as promotion from scoopswrestling.com, one of the big unofficial news sites of the time. They also made sure that everything was nice and legal, no chance of either of the big two claiming copyright infringement due to any of the wrestlers involved, meaning that, for example, the Bushwhackers become Luke and Butch, formerly the Bushwhackers. Seems like it shouldn't work, but legally it does. In any case, the stage was set. The first Heroes of Wrestling show would take place on October 10th, 1999 at the Casino Magic, a riverboat casino in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. The promotion for the show tried to make the best of what they had: Captain Lou Albano, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, Jake the Snake Roberts, and a titanic tussle of a main event between ex-WrestleMania headliner King Kong Bundy and ex-WWF champion, the former Yokozuna, plus hosting by the legendary commentator Gordon Solie. If anyone could add some respectability to this card, it was Solie, the NWA's voice of professional wrestling for many years, often regarded as the greatest wrestling commentator of all time. That was the idea anyway. Unfortunately, Gordon Solie's throat cancer happened to flare up, and he had to cancel his commitment at the 11th hour because he was unable to speak. Later in the year, his vocal cords would be removed, and the illness would ultimately claim him in July of 2000. Plan B was to go to Ted DiBiase as someone who'd had some name value in the booth, but he had a preaching commitment. Other names considered for the booth were Mick Karch, Les Thatcher, and Craig DeGeorge, but eventually Fosstone used one of their own guys, a man named Randy Rosenblum. Rosenblum had years of commentary experience. Unfortunately, it was all in college sports. He had basically no experience at all in wrestling, and he's the guy who's been put in the booth at this late stage. Eventually, the show ends up with the green Randy Rosenblum being accompanied by Dirty Dutch Mantell, sometime commentator and booker. It's, well, we'll see how this partnership plays out through the show. In conference calls for the show, Bill Stone puts a modest face on things, saying that it was the first time he'd properly promoted an event, and that simply put, if the public demands more, we will give them more, and if they didn't care, then they wouldn't. Main eventer King Kong Bundy talked about how he enjoyed the independence but was happy to once again be part of a nationwide, perhaps even worldwide event. Captain Lou Albano, Len 66, promoted the show in ways only he could, and Jake Roberts did a couple of TV spots of his own, claiming to be rid of his personal demons and saying that he was going to clean up wrestling, and that Heroes of Wrestling was a big part of that. When asked about the possibility that the wrestlers on the show might not be able to go anymore due to their advanced age, Bundy replied, quite simply, "The older the violin, the sweeter the music." As we get to bell time on October the 10th, the moment when the cameras go live, there may well have been a bit of panic. One of the participants for the semi-main event between Jake Roberts and Jim Neidhart hasn't arrived yet. It's easy to picture the scene, with Bill Stone rushing around, stressing out, and asking anyone if they've heard where the hell Jim the Anvil Neidhart is. He's not arrived yet, you see. He took a plane and that's all people know. Jake is there though. He's already cooped up in his dressing room, getting ready. Despite all this, however, the show has to go on. Heroes of Wrestling is ready to begin, coming to you live from the Casino Magic in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. 2,300 people are here to watch the show, which seems like a big number for an independent show at the time. However, a great deal of the tickets were papered. And so it's time to run this card down. That's the only way to truly document it, to go through the matches and give them an honest once-over, complete with as much historical info as I could find from the archives of both the Wrestling Observer and Pro Wrestling Torch, as well as other contemporary card reports, news articles, and the odd recollection. The review from DDT Digest, a popular WCW-focused website back in the day, gives us details of the pre-show which, unfortunately, is lost to time. Most of what's on there is thankfully repeated on the main show, but we do miss a promo from Jake Roberts. Indeed, a second Jake promo, different to the more famous one from this show. But we'll get to that in time. It's also worth noting that Gordon Solie is still being advertised for the show, even though he will not be appearing. At no point in the night will the Gordon Solie situation be explained. Finally, after a few seconds of dodgy silence, We come upon a graphic for Gorilla Monsoon, another legendary play-by-play announcer and wrestler who had passed away 4 days previously. This is followed by an introduction where the impact that Heroes of Wrestling will have on Bay St. Louis, Mississippi will be comparable to the impact that Hurricane Camille had, a 1969 storm that destroyed the area and killed over 250 people.
30 years ago was nearly blown off the map by Hurricane Camille. Since then, the Mississippi Gulf Coast has become one of America's premier resort destinations. And in just a short time, live from the jam-packed Casino Magic, a fury that could match that of Hurricane Camille just may erupt once again. For tonight, live, the mega event wrestling fans have been waiting for finally arrives. Legendary grudge matches will finally be settled in the Heroes of Wrestling.
As mentioned, Dutch Mantell and Randy Rosenbloom will be taking the headsets tonight and lay one down the card. Dutch, being a heel, naturally picks the bad guys to win every match, and Randy Rosenbloom somehow calls Too Cold Scorpio Too Cold Scorkum.
A cocky youngster, Julio Fantastico, against Too Cold Scorpio. Fantastico has been talking it up a lot.
Meanwhile, the participants for our first match get ready at the gorilla position, and in the ring, a man named Crispin Sanford says that tonight, somebody's going to get their ass whooped tonight.
So throw down your toys and get out of the sandbox. Playtime's over, because tonight, somebody's going to get their ass whooped tonight in here.
There is no way out of here. It will be dark soon. There is no way out of here.
No way out?
There's no easy way out. Listen, I'm the expert out here. You're the straight man. You call the action, and I'll fill in the blanks. You got that?
All right, I understand that, but I got to get my opinion across.
Here we are then. There's fireworks already as the first bout gets underway. The Samoan SWAT team come to Lewin first, made up of Samu and his cousin Fatu. Wait, wasn't Fatu in the WWF at this point? Already there's confusion, I'm sure, so let's explain. Samu here used to be in the WWF in the 90s when he teamed with Fatu as part of the Head Shrinkers. However, that Fatu is not Fatu, although he is Fatu. This Fatu is Sam Fatu, who is also known as the Tonga Kid and was in the WWF back in the 1980s. As an 18-year-old, he headlined a show at MSG against Roddy Piper in 1984. He is the twin brother of the other Fatu, who was then riding pretty high in the WWF as Rikishi Fatu. Got it? Okay. Anyway, as often happens with Samoan wrestlers as they get older, these two used to be in a bit of shape and are now... well, what are they, Scott?
He's fat!
This is Jay and Jimmy Uso's future right here. Everyone I've mentioned is part of the famous Anoa'i Samoan wrestling family. Samu and Fatu here are cousins. Being Samoan, naturally they also have a manager, and it is of course one of the great managers from the territorial era, the legendary Paul Adams. Wait, who? Who the hell is Paul Adams? And what is with this awful promo?
When I was approached about being part of the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, I had to think to myself, Self, what do you want to do to announce your presence nationwide with authority? So I said to myself, Self, why don't you go directly to the top of the food chain? You got some fat asses!
Good lord. He even manages to piss off the crowd by saying that he's in Biloxi, which he is not and nobody else here is. I can find out virtually nothing about Paul Adams. He may as well be some guy they pulled in off the street. That's how a pay-per-view promoting the appearance of some of the most famous wrestlers of all time begins, the show where legendary grudge matches will be settled once and for all, with a guy who nobody knows. Let that set the theme for the evening. Their opponents are Marty Jannetty and Tommy Rogers, both of whom were a part of high-flying tag teams in the 80s. Marty was a rocker with Shawn Michaels, and Tommy was a fantastic with Jackie Fulton. They actually both look in pretty decent shape, lean and mean. Finally, the bell rings and the action begins, and yep, it's very slow. Lots of stalling to start out with, although Samu does do the awesome Fat Gun Show, a spot made famous by Earthquake. Randy Rosenbloom calls a dropkick a flying kick, immediately showing off his wrestling knowledge. He then calls an arm drag a slam takedown and is immediately chastised by Dutch for it. They have less than zero chemistry on commentary.
cousin there. Look at that reversal and slam takedown by Jannetty.
It's got an arm drag. Arm drag. Get it?
What you get here is a very punchy, kicky affair. I think that Marty and Tommy could have probably still gone, but the Samoan SWAT team kind of can't. It isn't long before the action goes out of the ring, and we get our first foreign object of the night as Fatu hits Marty with a chair. No DQ. There's also no DQ for a blatant dick shot in full view of the ref. Marty doesn't give a shit about any of this and blatantly chats to Samu going over the next spot in full view of the cameras. Finally, we get a hot tag, of sorts, to Tommy, who cleans house until he tries a noggin knocker on the Samoans who, in wrestling lore, have very hard heads. A double DDT also has no effect. Marty dives on Tonga outside, but we just about miss Samu hitting Tommy with a sidekick. He picks up Tommy and nails him with a TKO for the 3 count at 10 minutes flat in a very dull opener that received half a star from Dave Meltzer at the Wrestling Observer. That half a star is enough to make this bout Big Dave's second highest rated match of the night.
I got him. The Samoans. I was right. I knew I was right for this job. My analysis proved true.
Seeing as we're not going to see any of these folks again, we may as well do a where are they now type deal as we finish each match. Marty Jannetty at this time was only a few months removed from a WCW stint and would make one appearance for ECW in 2000. He kinda went off the rails in 2004 until apparently getting born-again Christianised by his old partner, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. This led to some very well-received WWE appearances in 2005, including a Rockers Reformation and a truly excellent match with Kurt Angle. Oh, and being unable to stop cracking up when Vince wanted him to join the Kiss My Ass Club. However, Lowe's personal demons soon resurfaced, and as of now he is kind of blacklisted by the WWE due to being fired by them more times than you've had hot dinners. He's 57 years old and is still wrestling on indies to this day, notably a 2-year stint in Chicago where he tagged with the 1-2-3 Kid, Sean Waltman. Tommy Rogers would do a few matches for WCW in 2000, but not much after. He officially retired from the ring in 2007 and sadly passed away in 2015 at the age of 54. Samu was still wrestling in 2016, and in 2007 he and his cousin Rosie inducted the Wild Samoans, Arthur and Sika, into the WWE Hall of Fame. Sam Fatu, the Tonga Kid, hung around in the indies until retiring in 2011. The only other Paul Adams I can find in wrestling is someone who currently promotes shows in Portland.
Brother, you see how women are. Excuse me, Randy, you never had a woman. But you see how they are. You know, they'll turn on you in a moment.
I ignored that comment, I want you to know.
Before our second match, we get an angle to set things up. George the Animal Steele has been seen cavorting at Casino Magic with sensuous Sherry Martel, better known as Sensational Sherry, and we see them rush into a hotel room to apparently get it on. We also get our first visit with backstage interviewer Michael St. John, who is, rather green to put it mildly. Sherry gets over her relationship with the animal while Steele yells, "Fight, fight, fight."
You ready?
Yeah, you go. Fight. Fight.
No, this way. Look.
Nice.
Let's head to the ring.
His opponent tonight is Greg the Hammer Valentine, formerly of Mid-Atlantic and the WWF, he of the I Broke Wahoo's Leg t-shirt, Rhythm and Blues with the Honky Tonk Man and all that. He's 51 years old here and any skill he had is kind of gone, and he also cuts our second awful promo of the night. Apparently he's going to kill George Steele and he'll be leaving Lewin with Sherry. George the Animal Steele, a legendary wrestler back in the 60s and 70s who is also known for playing Tor Johnson in the 1994 film Ed Wood, comes to Lewin complete with a t-shirt. Almost immediately there is nothing but stalling. Wendy Rosenblum doesn't get the names of any moves won in this match, but that is because there are no moves to call. Valentine gets the upper hand when Steele goes to take his t-shirt off, battering him in the corner. And when the ref's back is turned, all suspense is destroyed as Sherry starts attacking Steele too. This all happens thanks to literally the worst ref of all time, who constantly stops Steele from doing anything, but then lets Greg get away with murder. Finally, Steele gets his shirt off, giving us all a sight of his legendarily hairy back. He takes advantage with a weird duct-taped foreign object. Unaware of Sherry's turncoat status, he hands the object to her, and she stealthily gives it to Valentine at the earliest opportunity, who uses it to his advantage. This happens in full view of the ref, who doesn't give a shit. We get a beautiful shot of the foreign object tucked in Valentine's pants, meaning that we also get a big shot of Greg Valentine's arse. Steele gets a couple of shots in and goes to Sherry for some comfort, but Sherry clobbers him with a chair and Valentine gets the free in an utterly torturous 6:37. Post-match domestic violence ahoy as Steele throws Sherry out of there and starts chasing them to the back, but then returns to the ring and does his turnbuckle eating shtick for the crowd. The turnbuckle for Steele is like spinach for Popeye. While a chair shot from Sherry was enough to put him down for the free, he no-sells a chair shot from Valentine and chases him to the back once more. Dave Meltzer gave this match -3 stars, which was enough to make it the joint second worst match on the card. It gets a lot worse than this, believe me. For some reason, the replays show the Greg Valentine arse shot again. Greg Valentine still does the odd match on the indie circuit to this day at the age of 67. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004, wrestled a match against Rob Conway in 2005, and appeared at Ric Flair's retirement ceremony in 2008. Sherry Martel was also inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2006, giving a legendary speech in the process, and made an appearance in TNA in the same year, offering her services to Bobby Roode. Sadly, she died of an overdose in 2007. George the Animal Steele, then aged 63, was the oldest wrestler on this card, and he would wrestle his last match in 2000. Already a WWE Hall of Fame inductee, Steele made occasional appearances on WWE programming, his last one in 2010. He also did a short film called Something Fishy in 2008, where two ex-wrestlers purchase a fishing camp. His co-star? Greg the Hammer Valentine. This was done as a pilot for a comedy series, but it was never picked up. George Steele passed away of kidney failure in 2015 at the age of 79.
This is one of the greatest of all time, one of the greatest events of all time. Bill Stone Jr., you're outdoing yourself. I can't believe it. They're heroes of wrestling, baby. You got Dutch Martel doing a great job. You're not doing a bad job either yourself, so we might give you a raise. But let's go from here.
Well, thank you for the compliment.
All right.
Randy Rosenblum and Dutch Mantell go over the events that we've just seen. Dutch is sympathetic with George for once, while Randy appears to be either somewhat confused by everything or using all the skills he learned from his time at the GameSack School of Acting. We cut to St. John backstage for an interview with one of the fellas from the next match, Julio Fantastico. At least we eventually do once the audio stops crapping out and squeaking all over the place.
Julio Fantastico. Good morning and welcome to Sandwell Hospital Television, yet again down in the basement.
He cuts a heel promo against his opponent, Too Cold Scorpio. And finally we have a match where nobody is over the age of 40. Julio Fantastico comes to the ring and announcer Crispin Sanford calls him Julio et Fantastico. Sadly Fantastico is nowhere to be seen, but at least Julio's here. He's not done much, just some short stints as a job guy in WWF and WCW in the mid-late 90s. You may ask how this guy is considered a hero of wrestling, but to be honest, the sight of someone who looks young enough to actually go is welcome at this point. His opponent, Too Cold Scorpio, an influential high flyer who's had good runs in WWF, WCW and ECW, comes to the ring holding a rather cheap-looking belt, which is not referenced by the commentators or the announcer. I've done some research and, honestly, I don't know what the belt is. He isn't recorded as being a champion anywhere at this time. Frankly, the belt looks like a cheap replica of WCW's heavyweight title, because, well, that's exactly what it was. Julio Fantastico, aged 27, is the baby of this card. Scorpio himself is 34, which makes him third youngest, 1 year behind the 33-year-old Sam Fatu from the first match. This match on most cards would normally be kind of lousy. Scorpio and Fantastico just don't have particularly good chemistry together at all. On this card, however, well, it's good for two things. Firstly, just because it's nice to see some actual wrestling moves, and secondly, it's unintentionally good because of something unplanned, the arrival of Captain Lou Albano on the commentary table. Apparently Captain Lou was actually supposed to come out for the next match, but went too early and ended up doing this one instead. Lou Albano is, well, he's unique. He says Billy, Billy, Billy a lot, and talks so fast. He's like someone who's trying to sell you a cheap suit and challenge you to a game of 3-card Monty at the same time. Just for an example, here's something he says about Randy Rosenbloom.
He doesn't seem bad. He looks like he's got the brain of a dehydrated baby if they put it in a pigeon or pancake fly backwards, but he's not a bad guy.
Did you catch that? Let's listen again.
He doesn't seem bad. He looks like he's got the brain of a dehydrated baby if they put it in a pigeon or pancake fly backwards, but he's not a bad guy.
Jeez, I don't know what he said. I slowed it down and I still don't know. Something about him looking like a dehydrated baby, I think. Anyway, Randy Rosenbloom calls a dropkick a leg drop, and Captain Lou has to educate him on what a dropkick is.
Look at the
mobility and the leg
what
drop.
A drop kick.
And a reversal, he took him down. Look at that job there.
Now, that was a drop kick, not a leg drop, but it was a drop kick. But it was very
the drop
good.
kick turned him around. That
Turned
was
him
good
around.
stuff.
Well, Lou, sort of give him a little bit of leeway here because he's sort of new to this, and he's sort of a little bit of a rookie, but he's not a bad guy.
Although he quickly goes back to calling it a flying kick. Fortunately, I don't think any other wrestlers on this card are capable of throwing a dropkick, so we won't be hearing this call much more. Both guys do dives to the outside, and Julio also does a kind of awkward, botchy skin the cat spot before his. Lawsuit ahoy, as Julio takes a nasty-looking backdrop to the outside, kicking a fan in the process. We also can't see anything when they're in the crowd because there's no close-up cameras. At some point, Randy Rosenbloom, for whatever reason, starts calling Too Cold Scorpio the Dragon.
Oh! He's not one of the fighters,
one of the fans. One of the fans.
Like one, though. Fantastico and Dragon, we don't know where they are. There's the Dragon coming back. He's bringing back Fantastico.
I have no idea where that could have come from. No, Ricky Steamboat is not on this card. And yes, I wish he were too. Despite everything, the match builds up to a decent finish. Julio hits a good-looking facebuster from the second rope, but Scorpio ducks a clothesline and hits a corkscrew kick, basically Kofi Kingston's Trouble in Paradise. Body slam, and Scorpio hits his finishing somersault leg drop, the tumbleweed, and it looks great. However, he then decides to go to the opposing corner and hit it again with a corkscrew, and he completely misses it. In fact, I reckon he legit catches Julio in the face with his hand. Despite the awful-looking botch, Scorpio gets the 3 in 9:37 to end what was, honestly, a perfectly acceptable match. Apparently it was supposed to go a few minutes longer, but the production team cut it short because of the lack of any gimmicks. I think the short length actually improved things, to be honest. Inexplicably, the botched finish is repeated from an even worse angle. Meltzer gave this match 1.5 stars, which, you guessed it, makes this match the best rated one on the whole card. According to Wade Keller at PW Torch, this match was virtually snuck onto the card as the Fosstone guys had little interest in anyone who didn't appear on Saturday night's main event in the 1980s. I mean, it's something at least. Julio Fantastico is probably better known to wrestling fans as Julio De Niro, and his most famous one in a major promotion was probably ECW in 2000, where he teamed with Easy Money. He also wrestled for TNA in 2003 as part of a stable headed by Raven, before later feuding with him. Although not officially retired, he hasn't wrestled since 2013. Not long after this, Too Cold Scorpio made a few appearances in ECW, including a heavyweight title bout against Mike Awesome, before having a pretty successful one in Japan as part of Pro Wrestling Noah. He signed for the WWE again in 2006 but never appeared on TV, and took part in a Battle Royal on Raw's 15th anniversary in 2008. He's also made appearances on high-profile indie cards, a couple for TNA here and there, and is still active on the indie circuit at 51 years of age. Before the next match, we have a special announcement. Captain Lou Albano has been signed up to be the Commissioner of Heroes of Wrestling going forward. Lou puts it over very well, I guess. He can put over anything. He can even, with a straight face, say that this is the best spectacle he has ever been a part of in his life. Yep, better than WrestleMania.
I am proud to be the head of the greatest organization around, the Heroes of Wrestling. Dutch, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I am the new commissioner.
What's the future for the Heroes of Wrestling?
The future for the Heroes of Wrestling is throughout the country. Events, pay-per-view events, special appearances, special events, with the commissioner being there. We'll go by the book. We'll have great matches. The great talent that we have here tonight, Bill Stone Productions, right here at Casino Magic. This is the greatest production of all time. I'm Captain Lou, and I'm telling it to you, I feel so good, so proud, and so elated. Captain Lou, oh, man, the new commissioner. Oh, I can't believe it.
Unbelievable, Captain Lou.
It's very easy to mock his contributions to the show because they're ridiculously insincere, but I almost can't because he's just too freaking Captain Lou Albano. He's just insane. The fake crying is a bit too much, mind you.
I think the fans here in Casino Magic tonight at the Heroes of Wrestling, I think they should just sort of leave these guys alone for a while. But, you know, hey, they bought a ticket. They can do what they want. They can do what they want to do, too. If it was me, I'd probably come out in the crowd and slap each and every one of them individually because they wouldn't holler at me.
Next up, we have an interview backstage with King Kong Bundy putting over the main event. The 450-pound King Kong Bundy wittily calls Yokozuna Porkozuna, and Michael St. John calls Yokozuna Yokozuno. And after all this, we're ready for our next match. By God, I wish we weren't.
They'll meet head-on. Battle of the Titanics. King Kong Bundy, Yokozuna, coming up on Heroes of Wrestling.
Yep, it's the battle of the old WWF tag teams. I'm sure you're all excited to see them. Volkoff and Sheik enter the ring first and run through all their shtick. They're accompanied by Nikita Brezhnikov, another person who is virtually unknown, although apparently he was Volkoff's roommate at the time. Volkoff sings the Russian national anthem very badly, Sheik spits into the microphone and says USA Pa, and then does the Persian clubs routine. This is somewhat unimpressive as the clubs look like they weigh about 2 pounds soaking wet. Sheik says that he's much better than that jabroni Hulk Hogan and Bob Backlund, USA, don't say USA, USA, Pa. The audience does respond to this, however. In Bay St. Louis, it doesn't matter that we're 10 years removed from the end of the Cold War. The Bushwhackers enter with their usual business, giving some fortunate fans a jolly good lick on the head. Only a couple of them appear to be on the verge of tears afterwards. Still amazing to think that these two were one of the most sadistic and violent tag teams ever before the WWF turned them into a joke. Randy Rosenblum calls them Luke and Dutch, and is once again chewed out by Dutch Mantello.
The Bushwhackers, Luke and Dutch.
Luke
These men are from New Zealand.
Luke and who?
Luke and Butch.
Right.
You're Dutch.
Right. You said Luke and Dutch. Don't ever put me in the category with these guys here. Never. That's a real bad. That's a bad no-no. I know you didn't.
After about 5 minutes of all this, the bell rings and this tussle gets underway. To be honest, a proper call of this match wouldn't do it justice. Even for this card, it's terrible beyond words. It is, in fact, the worst match that has ever taken place on any pay-per-view, ever. So instead, here's a special countdown. The top 5 most pathetic things that happened in this match. Here we go. Number 5. The opening itself. Because they're dirty foreigners, Volkoff and Sheik Pearl Harbor the Bushies as they mug for the crowd, and Volkoff's first kick is, well, completely missed. He then follows up with the absolute poorest knees you have ever seen on Luke. Volkoff's offense is just spectacular in how utterly nothing it is. I've seen newborn babies who could hit Finns harder than Volkoff does in this match. And yet, his true moment is to come. Number 4. The commentary continues to spiral out of control. Dutch Mantell does nothing but bicker constantly with Randy, thus not helping anything, but poor Randy is just completely clueless. Despite the total lack of action in this match, he is still unable to call it. He has another massive brain fart and somehow manages to call Iron Sheik the Iron Curtain. He does this repeatedly.
See, they're not exactly the Mensa members of wrestling.
You're right.
Wrestling
Volkoff
society.
gets a breather, and the Iron Curtain is working over Luke.
Look who's talking.
Number 3. The finish. For the third time tonight, we get the use of an international object. Volkoff accidentally clobbers Sheik with it, who proceeds to take... Actually, I don't know if that's really classed as a bump. It's the cherry on top of a complete mess, really, but thankfully it ends the horrible match. Number 2. The Iron Sheik in general. Just everything he did. Sheiky was just completely immobile. He's 61 here and he was barely able to get into the ring. At one point he just walks into Luke, who almost bumps for him out of respect. Or pity. What else can you do? Most of the time he's just in the corner and looks like he's in agonising pain. He also cuts a promo against the crowd chanting USA mid-match, keeping in mind, of course, that the Bushwhackers are from New Zealand. It's a sad, sad sight. In his review, Dave Meltzer said that the Iron Sheik was moving like Andre the Giant was in the weeks before his death. I'm inclined to agree with that. But hey, I mean, what could be expected from someone who just a year later would take part in a crack pipe on a pole match for Juggalo Championship Wrestling? And number 1? Well, there's this thing in American sport where people like to define legendary moments by using the definitive article. For example, Michael Jordan's 1989 series-winning basket against the Cavs is known as the shot, and Mike Jones' Super Bowl winning tackle in 2000 on Kevin Dyson is the tackle. Well, Here is the backbreaker. Nikolai Volkoff's one move of the match. He tries to pick Luke up and almost drops him, before finally picking him up to chest height, and then very softly setting him down on his knee, to the point where perhaps a few body hairs of Luke's might have made contact with the knee. He puts Luke on the ground as if he were putting a baby into the cot. It is, without question, the worst performed manoeuvre in professional wrestling history. And what does Randy Rosenblum call this incredible moment? He calls it a soft slam. Even he knows it was terrible.
He's going to dump him.
The soft slam. 1, 2.
So, as mentioned, the Bushwhackers get the W in an 8:42 that made you pray for death after Volkoff accidentally clobbered Sheik with a foreign object. After the match, the Dirty Foreigners do their usual shtick of teasing dissension and a fight, before ultimately kissing and making up. Dave Meltzer gave this match minus 459.4 stars, aka absolute zero, the worst match he'd ever rated in his life. Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 Weekly rated it minus all the stars in the universe, and the universe is infinite. Wade Keller at PW Torch, meanwhile, rated it a comparatively rapturous minus 1 star, not even the lowest rating he'd give for a match on the show. Look, search Backyard Wrestling on YouTube, pick any match at random, and chances are you'll find a better performance than the one that these absolute wrecks gave here. This match even made me feel sorry for the Bushwhackers somewhat. They were bad, but they were the frickin' Amazing Red and AJ Styles compared to Sheik and Volkoff. Just damn. Imagine the feeling of spending $20 on this show. It's kind of difficult to do a Where Are They Now for the Iron Sheik, because where do you even start? In 2001, he competed in and won the Gimmick Battle Royal at WrestleMania 17, probably because he's one guy who really wouldn't be able to do any kind of bump over the top rope. His last official match was in 2010, but he has become rather famous due to his shoot interviews, which mostly consist of him laying into his former colleagues, such as one B. Brian Blair.
Brian Blair, son of a bitch, no good, low life, all country way, make him humble, suplex him, put him in a camel clutch, break his back, make him humble to he respect Iron Sheik. And besides that, everything was great.
Years later, they were brought together for a reconciliation, and Sheik gratefully took the opportunity to bury the hatchet. Did I say bury the hatchet? I meant slap the shit out of him. The likes of Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Jake Roberts, The Ultimate Warrior, Ted DiBiase, and even Nikolai Volkoff at times are all no good motherfuckers. He frequently appears on The Howard Stern Show. He has a long and probably still current history with crack cocaine. And there's a lot here, frankly. He's still going at the age of 75. Nikolai Volkoff has also made the odd WWE appearance every now and again, usually with Sheik, as well as making an unsuccessful one for political office. He still wrestles every now and again on the circuit, and lives in a farm with over 100 cats and his wife of 35 years. Both Volkoff and the Iron Sheik were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2005, and Sheik's speech is considered one of the ceremony's all-time highlights. The Bushwhackers stopped teaming in 2001 after Butcher's retirement due to injury, although Luke has stayed around somewhat. He has made frequent appearances for Ring of Honor, often as a supporter and a podcast host, but occasionally as part of an angle and even wrestling. Both Bushwhackers were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015.
See, Rosenblum, you never had a fight in your life, have you? Have you ever been in a fight?
I'm too nice a guy.
See, you never had a fight in your life. See, I've fought all my life. I've fought in bars and off, on side of the road. I fought in rings. I fought everywhere.
You bragging about that?
Well, no, but you've got to, you see, because this is some tough guys, and if you're going to fight...
We get another promo package leading up to the next bout, Stan Lane versus Tully Blanchard, aka the Midnight Express versus the Four Horsemen. Blanchard comes out of his car and is greeted by Michael St. John, but then he is jumped by Stan, who tries to put him in the boot of his car. After an awkward cut to the arena, my word, the production on this event, we get the second part of the package. Tully Blanchard gives this show a promo that is far, far better than it deserves and is worth watching in full.
I have been in wrestling a long time, and I've been out of it a long time. And I came here and I agreed to do this thing, the Heroes of Wrestling, and was looking to have fun. And have a good match with Stan Lane. I don't do this for a living anymore. This kind of stuff here is I am really, what I'm having is a flashback, really. I mean, we're talking about the intensity that I had with Dusty Rhodes and Wahoo McDaniels and the Road Warriors and Demolition and Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels when they were just coming up with the WWF. We're talking about taking everything that you got, everything that you are, and bringing it and stirring it back up. I've been gone and just subdued and low-key, low-profile. But Stan Lane, I'm going to tell you the truth. The only reason you ever became a world champion is because you were Bobby Eaton's partner and Jim Cornette standing in the corner, and you rode a tidal wave that you didn't build. Well, the Four Horsemen was a tidal wave that I helped build, and you're going to find out just exactly what a tidal wave is all about, because I'm going to tell you, Stan, 10 years is bubbled up inside me. 10 years all of a sudden at one time is bubbled up inside me. And everybody that's ever screwed me, anybody that's ever done me wrong, is all coming out. And Stan, the times and the feelings that I used to have for Dusty Rhodes have all just come to the surface. And the feelings that I used to have for people like Jim Herd and the people that signed the contracts with the WWF and WCW, it's all come to the surface. And I don't need to scream and holler anymore. I just got to look at my blood, because you wanted to jam me in a trunk and make a name for yourself. Well, it's too late for you to make a name for yourself. And I promise you, Tully Blanchard might be a little bit older, but I still got the fire that made me what I was. And Stan Lane, you will find out what being a horseman is all about tonight.
This is the one moment of the show that's actually filled with fire from one of the best talkers of his era. It's serious, it builds, it's old school. And all of a sudden, there's a match on the card that, damn it, we actually want to see. This is, without question, the best moment of the entire Heroes of Wrestling card. This one classic, slow burn screed where a guy who's actually pretty damn good shows you just how a wrestling promo is done. Even before getting into the ring, Tully Blanchard has stolen the entire frickin' show. On with it then. Sweet Stan Lane is out first, and he cuts a promo about how he's a big star now and all the ladies love him. His appearance, that of a guy in his mid-40s still trying to look 25, spiky blonde hair and all, kinda belies that. He talks about how he's now a star on ESPN, where he was hosting a boat racing show at the time, and blah blah. He then announces himself as the Gangster of Love and does the Mr. Kennedy shtick before Kennedy did it. Blanchard gets fireworks for his entrance while Stan runs him down, calling him nothing but a tent preacher. Since largely retiring from the business, he'd been running a prison ministry. In the end, Blanchard immediately goes after Stan as the bell rings. The story of the match is that Blanchard had been out of the ring for over a decade, although that's not strictly true. He'd wrestled a few times here and there in the 90s. In any case, though, damn, Blanchard can still go. An amazing wrestler in his prime, he certainly still had the skills here. He can go on offense, and he can certainly bump and sell too. Stan Lane, for his part, does a good job of his own signature offense. He has a black belt in redneck foo, meaning lots of sidekicks, Captain Kirk chops and cocky karate poses. It kinda worked better when he was younger, but it's still not too bad here. There's definite fire outside as Stan runs Blanchard into a post and chokes him with a cable, before Blanchard responds with a figure 4 on the outside. The match generally goes okay, as these two can work fine together and produce a decent, very old school match, but two things do bring it down. Firstly, there's the production. Our idiot commentary team has taken Stan's claims of still being a hit with the ladies at face value, and there are constant cuts to women in the crowd who are apparently mesmerised by Stan Lane. Most of them just look totally bored. In fact, whenever this show cuts to somebody in the audience, which is often, 9 times out of 10 they look as though they would rather be anywhere else but here. This is why the WWE have often used plants for their audience cutaways, folks. Secondly, there's the finish. By the match's end, it's a little clear that the two wrestlers don't have a lot left in the tank, although thankfully there was something there to give in the first place. Stan Lane hits a backdrop on Tully and holds it for the pin. Tully gets his shoulder up, but the referee counts the fall and calls the match. Stan thinks he's won, but in actual fact, Tully has. He had his shoulder up, but Stan also had both shoulders on the ground. And so Tully wins the match in 7:04. Stan gets some afters in post-match before Tully gets a chant, and some happy fans throw up the Horseman sign. The finish does kind of stink, alas. It comes totally out of nowhere, and the crowd do not get it at all. This is a classic dusty finish, one with a swerve that worked well back in the 1970s, but it's been many years since anyone had the balls to use it, and it's completely lost here. Randy Rosenblum is also totally poleaxed by it, and it's only thanks to Dutch Mantell that we get a somewhat clear explanation of what actually happened. The finish does bring the match down a little, and it didn't exactly rate well because of it. Still, aside from the finish, the rest of the match was pretty much fine, and this match, along with Scorpio and Julio, is the best action we'll end up seeing tonight. And we'll always have that promo. Thanks, Tully. Thanks, Stan. You both contributed. After Heroes of Wrestling, Tully Blanchard would not enter the ring again until 2005, when he fought Jeff Jarrett at Wrestle Reunion, another Legends-based card. He wrestled his last official match in 2007, and he is still preaching the gospel as a prison minister. In 2012, he and the rest of the Four Horsemen were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Blanchard has had the odd job backstage, including a very short WWE production one in 2005, and recently appeared with Ric Flair and Arn Anderson on WWE's Table for Free to talk about the glory days of the Horsemen. Stan Lane also only wrestled a few more times after this show, having his last match in 2008. Largely a tag wrestler through his career, Heroes of Wrestling was his final singles match. Since then, he has kept active on the convention circuit, often appearing with the rest of the Midnight Express to meet fans and talk about his career. It has to be said that while Stan didn't look too good for 46 here, he looks much better for 64 now.
People got their cameras out here now, knowing this is an historical event in the wrestling profession. Oh, man, he's just dripping.
One man gang is quicker now. He used to be 425 pounds. He's down to a spelt 360.
Backstage, we get another special from the production truck. The audio for the interview with King Kong Bundy and Jim Neidhart is totally gone for the first 10 seconds. It's a generic promo where Jim talks about not wanting to see any snakes, and Bundy says he's got his back, and then Michael calls him Jim the Neidville Anhart. So, hooray! Looks like Jim Neidhart's shown up after all. He had transport problems and only turned up 40 minutes before his match. But why is he with King Kong Bundy even though the two of them are in separate matches? We'll have to see what's up there later on. But for now, we've got another match.
Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Wow, these guys, it's getting crazy back here. Back to you.
Next up is a match with no build between two folks who kinda just like to go out there and have a bit of a brawl. It's the One-Man Gang versus Abdullah the Butcher. One-Man Gang comes out first. He's best known for a WWF run, including some time spent as a Keenly African Dream. No messing around. Straight away, OMG is throwing his chain and some chairs into the ring as we cut to his thoughts backstage. Basically, he's gonna f*** Abby up.
This is not going to be for the weak of heart or the weak of stomach, because I, the One-Man Gang, am taking you out once and for all.
Abdullah comes down next with his manager, Honest John Cheatham. He is a man who has over 30 years of experience in the ring, mostly in brawls all over Japan, Puerto Rico, and America. The marks are certainly there, in particular the 3 massive divots in his head from years upon years of bleeding. Abdullah is immediately attacked by OMG as he enters the ring. The bell sounds, and this war is underway. The commentators immediately say that this is going to be a match for the hardcore fan, and this proves true. OMG attacks Abby with his chain, and I think it takes less than 30 seconds for Abby to blade on the top of his head. It's freaking nasty, and he gets tons of colour. OMG continues to pound him with the chain, choke him with it, hit him with the odd chair and so forth. After a few minutes of this, Abby finally manages to knock OMG down, and then attacks him with his golden spike. We see Abby licking his own blood off his fingers, not exactly a pretty sight, and now the gang's done his own nasty blade job. Both men are bleeding like stuck pigs. And after that, well, it's time for lunch. Abby goes after OMG with his trademark fork. He stabs him with it, he opens his head wounds up with it, and worst of all, he frickin' fishhooks him with it. The sight of the blood of these two combatants mixing together is probably a good time for me to tell you that Abby has had hepatitis C for an undisclosed but long amount of time. He hits OMG with a vicious chair shot, and then the production team managed to miss the only move of the match, Abby hitting OMG with his Sudanese meat cleaver elbow drop. OMG rolls out of the ring, and the two brawl some more right at the commentator's table. Somewhere in this mess, the bell rings, and the official result is a double countout at 7:34. The carnage continues with both Abby and OMG brutalising the security who try to pull him apart, before they just go ahead and brawl to the back. A shocked Randy Rosenblum shows off his blood-spattered notes.
The blood everywhere. Blood on this is right on my board here. I was working on the board. That's the material. Unbelievable.
Are you all right?
I'm okay. No blood on me. I'm fine. We're fine.
You were closer to him than I was.
Okay.
This match, needless to say, was not for the purists. They bled everywhere, they bled outside, they splattered blood over the commentators, the tables, even members of the audience. God damn, it was ugly. The Fosstone production team were horrified at this match, seeing the two bleed all over the shop like that. They wanted this match because it would appeal more to the ECW type crowd, but they didn't want this. What if someone files a lawsuit? What will the pay-per-view carriers say? Also, apparently the Fosstone people thought that the blood in wrestling matches was fake, and were mortified to learn that wrestlers actually cut themselves open to get that colour. Shows how much they knew. Anyway, this was not a good match. In fact, it was quite terrible. I will say, however, that the crowd were much hotter for this match than they have been for anything else on the show. It can't be a good bloodfest after all. One man Gan would suffer a heart attack the next year, which caused him to change his lifestyle and largely retire from the ring, although he did appear in the WrestleMania 17 gimmick Battle Royal in 2001. He had his last official match in 2009 and spent time working as a prison guard. Unfortunately, his house was destroyed in a flood in 2016, and people have been donating to help him get back on his feet. As for Abdullah the Butcher, well, he continued to wrestle right up to 2010, despite being one of the older wrestlers on this card at 58. He's also known for running a restaurant at one stage, which is now closed. His induction to the WWE Hall of Fame in 2011 caused fellow inductee superstar Billy Graham to forfeit his place in the hall, saying that he did not wish to share it with Abdullah. In 2013, he lost a lawsuit to wrestler Devon Nicholson, who successfully claimed that he contracted hepatitis C after a match with Abdullah, a result that greatly damaged his reputation, and most recently he announced that he was selling his WWE Hall of Fame win.
Let's face it, Randy, these guys are older. They're not in their 20s anymore. They're not even in their 30s anymore. But let me say, these things hurt. And they hurt worse than when you were younger. Let's not tell a lie. Let's tell the truth. These guys are older. All these heroes of wrestling are older guys.
Well, no shit.
The action rolls on then, as we get the angle to set up the next match. Cowboy Bob Orton, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and Captain Lou are playing each other at cards. We are in a casino after all. Until Albano catches Orton cheating. Orton and Snuka start to brawl, and that's why we've got a match. Captain Lou and Snuka then do a backstage interview, which mostly consists of Captain Lou talking about being the new commissioner for Heroes of Wrestling, while Snuka stands there not saying a word or moving a muscle. Bob Orton also does a very gruff promo where he says he didn't cheat, but he's going to whoop some ass. And damn, I mean, he's 48 years old here, but he actually looks like the oldest person on the whole card. And so Orton comes down to Lewin, famously part of the WWF in the mid-80s, one of the best technical wrestlers of his day. Dutch helpfully explains that Bob Orton Jr. is named after his father, Bob Orton, and Ace is, of course, the father of current WWE wrestler Randy Orton. Jimmy Snuka, also a famous 80s WWF star, comes down with Captain Lou Albano in tow, and we get this match underway. This is, of course, a bout between the two cornermen in the main event of WrestleMania 1, Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff versus Hulk Hogan and Mr. T.
I'm going to tell you, Randy, we have turned the clock back tonight. We have turned the clock back tonight.
Nostalgia is in.
The match does kind of start off hot as Snuka hits a flying body press from the second rope, but it isn't long before the tanks run out. I kind of get the feeling from what Orton does in this match that he could still kind of go here, but Snuka flat out could not. He was gassed a minute in. Ultimately, Orton takes control, and you know how Randy Orton is relentless with his rest holds? Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as Bob holds Snuka in various arm locks for about 5 minutes of the match. The crowd are pretty responsive for Snuka, but soon get into chanting at Orton, including the most rednecky chant of them all, "Bob is a f***."
On the first ever Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, and I hope he doesn't start paying too much attention to these people.
Snuka writhing in pain.
That is kind of rude to talk to somebody about somebody's sexual orientation.
I would agree with that.
Captain Lou, meanwhile, is busy sucking up to a man who's apparently running this riverboat casino, while Dutch wonders about his impartiality now he's a commissioner. Randy says that this is apparently Captain Lou's last match as a manager, and blah blah, really, who the fuck cares? Bob pauses to jaw-jack at the crowd, which gives Snuka time to recover. He comes back with chops and a headbutt. Orton does a bump onto the top turnbuckle off a whip, followed by the nutcracker off a kick that doesn't land, and it's go-home time. Snuka goes up slowly for the Superfly leap, but Orton cuts him off and sets up for his own finisher, the Superplex. However, Captain Lou holds onto Snuka's leg, meaning that Bob just falls off. Cowboy tries to go after Captain Lou and ends up hurting himself, and then gets as close as he possibly can to Superfly so that he can hit a flying body press for the win in a quite frankly glacial 11:43. The Bob is a f*** chants continue as a sad Cowboy leaves and Snuka celebrates. Once again, it's the same old story. These folks can't go anymore. The commentary team are now doing their best to hide it, saying that they have to wrestle smarter now because everything hurts more, but there's no real way to conceal just how broken up and beaten down some of these guys are. And there are still 2 matches to go. Cowboy Bob Orton would not step in the ring for over 5 years after this show, but made something of a comeback in 2005 after being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. He would become a part of WWE television, helping his son Randy in his lengthy feud against The Undertaker. This included several memorable vignettes and also a few matches. However, he was released in 2006. Once again, it seems like a long-standing yet dormant case of hepatitis might have been the cause. He has appeared on WWE TV since, however, and last wrestled in 2016. And then there's Superfly. Snuka often appeared on WWE TV, even in matches at times, including as part of a Legends Gauntlet match with Roddy Piper and Ricky Steamboat against Chris Jericho at WrestleMania in 2009, and he continued to appear in matches until 2015. His daughter Tamina is a current WWE wrestler. However, one thing always cast a shadow over him, that being his involvement in the death of his then girlfriend, Nancy Argentino, in 1983 after she was found battered to death in Snuka's hotel room. Snuka never faced charges at the time, and it's long rumoured that Vince McMahon assisted in getting him off, but he lost a judgment against Argentino's parents in 1985, which he never paid off. Generally, the consensus among people is that Snuka did it, although it was not premeditated. The case remained open, was revisited in 2013, and in 2015 Snuka was arrested on charges of third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. However, he was deemed not mentally competent to stand trial in June 2016 due to suffering from dementia, and on January 3rd, 2017, the charges against Snuka were dismissed due to his health. 12 days later, Jimmy Snuka died aged 73 while in hospice care due to a terminal illness. He's undoubtedly one of the biggest stars on this card, but he's one of those wrestlers who will always have an asterisk after his legacy.
Everybody makes mistakes. Jake has made probably more than his share, but I'm going to tell you, the people here, they love Jake the Snake.
He was one of the first to come to Casino Magic. He's been waiting a few days for this match, just waiting to get a Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
And so there are 2 matches left on the card. Next up is Jake the Snake Roberts versus Jim the Anvil Neidhart, followed by the main event 1,000-pound Titanic tussle between King Kong Bundy and Yokozuna. But before we get into those, it's a good idea to profile one of the 4 wrestlers. Jake Roberts is perhaps the most well-known wrestler on this whole card, a huge star in the 80s WWF, often regarded as one of the greatest psychological minds in the wrestling business, and one of the very best promos. However, at the time of this show, Jake Roberts was at something of a low. He was often wrestling indies in front of a couple hundred people, was very out of shape, estranged from his daughter, and addicted to both alcohol and crack cocaine. This low period would be documented in the 1999 film Beyond the Mat, released 12 days after this pay-per-view, where he attempts to reconcile with his daughter and is at one stage interviewed straight after smoking crack.
No self-pity, no. Absolutely not.
I do not feel sorry for myself, okay? That's wrong, totally wrong. If that's what you're getting on that camera, it's wrong. I do not feel sorry for myself. I asked for every damn thing I got, okay?
That would have been a while prior to this pay-per-view, mind you. Jake Roberts was very into the Heroes of Wrestling show and toured the country promoting it at no extra charge. He appeared on a few TV spots where he said that he wished to clean up wrestling and said that he himself was clean now, rid of his personal demons.
I mean, I didn't want to forgive myself. That was one of my biggest problems, is I hated me.
Right.
I did not want to forgive myself. And that pastor that night on the phone told me, he said, Jake, you are not going to make it because you can't forgive yourself. And I said, well, I can't. You don't know what I've done. He goes, wait a minute. If God forgave you, who are you not to forgive yourself?
He also admonished the current raunchy and controversial WWF product, saying that he would never let his kids watch it, and that Heroes of Wrestling was a step in the right direction. For Jake Roberts, this show was his big chance for a comeback. On the day of the show, Jake received a call from his ex-wife Cheryl. You might remember her playing a part in Jake's feud with Ravishing Rick Rude in the 80s. Cheryl, who believed that Jake was receiving a substantial paycheck for working the show, told Jake that she expected a large back payment in child support by October 12th, or she would see to it that Jake was arrested. Some say that this wasn't the first time that Jake had told such a story. In any case, Jake went to his dressing room and shut himself in, not coming out until it was time to cut his pre-match promo. Back in the arena, Randy Rosenblum throws it over to Michael St. John with Jake the Snake Roberts. If you've never seen this promo before, you probably want to watch it in full. So here it is.
Gentlemen, back here I have a man of legendary proportions, the man Jake the Snake Roberts. He is a man that you all recognize. He's a legend. Come on, Jake, get on in here. The folks want to hear from you.
What I'm saying right now is this. You know, you go to a casino, and everybody says, well, gosh, a casino, you should gamble. Let me tell you something, Anvil. You don't want to play cards with me because I'll cheat, okay? I cheat. You want to play 21? I got 22. You want to play blackjack? I got 2 of those too. You want to play aces and eights? Maybe I got too many of those too. Bottom line is this. You do not gamble with me. The only time you should gamble is this. Listen to me. When you walk in a casino and you want to gamble, the main thing is you should realize this. To gamble, you must accept losing. I don't accept losing. And neither does Damien. Damien, my friend. My friend Damien is right here. You see Damien?
Yeah, he just stuck his head out at
Nice
it.
looking pile of snake, huh?
Oh.
You don't want to see us, do you?
Well, I
Let me
know.
show you something.
Yeah, that's
Let
okay,
me show you
Jake.
No, I tell you what, Anvil. Go ahead, Anvil. Roll the dice. Mr. Cameraman, get your ass back up here. Hello? I'm talking to you. Get the camera back up here. That is not what you need to worry about, Anvil. The bottom line is this. When the DDT comes, then the snake comes out. Worry about the DDT. 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 Think about it.
A man of his word, Jake the Snake Roberts. Back to ringside.
So yes, that was a thing. Many of these moments have entered wrestling memedom. You want to play 21? I got 22. The slap of the head. You want to play blackjack? I got 2 of those too. DDT, DDT, DDT. It's a sight, that's for sure. For the people at Heroes of Wrestling, it's the first time that they see Jake in, well, what was sadly often his state then. Intoxicated. Now you can be sure that there's plenty of wrestlers who've appeared on pay-per-views either drunk or high or both, but it's rarely this bad. And now, this man is going to go out to the arena and wrestle a match. There is a little delay before Jim Lee Anvil Neidhart, most famous for teaming with Bret Hart as the Hart Foundation in the WWF, comes out. One can only imagine what the conversation was like backstage. We do know bits, but for now we'll content ourselves with calling things from the audience's eye, if you will. Anyway, Neidhart comes out, and then Jake comes out with his snake Damien in the bag and with a t-shirt on. He comes out, puts the snake in the corner, and then goes back to the, back. A short time later, he returns without his shirt, revealing his shape. He then spots a woman in the crowd, gets close to her, and gets her to rub the sort of pecs that Lex Luger could only dream of obtaining. Finally, he's in the ring, and the bell sounds. Jim Neidhart immediately gets out of the ring, and we get tons of stalling as Jake staggers around. Jim has the look of someone who's just seen a man die and has no idea what to do next. He tentatively gets into the ring, and we get a tie-up. And not much else. Jim works the arm for a bit, and the pace is, once again, slow. This continues for a couple of minutes. No moves, no bumps. Finally, Jake tries to go for a DDT, but Jim quickly gets the hell out of there. Can't say I blame him. I mean, I sure wouldn't want to take a DDT from Jake in his condition either. At this point, Jake notices that Damien's getting out of his bag, and so he gets the snake out. He then proceeds to straddle the python betwixt the legs as if it were a penis. Cut to the crowd, who are bemused. Jake continues to straddle the python and begins to mimic jerking it off. He then lays on the floor and starts kissing the python. It is the job of someone like me to try and get into a person's mind, but I couldn't tell you what Jake's thinking right here, as I've never been that pissed. More cuts to the crowd, and more shots of Jim wondering how best to approach this, problem. Suddenly, King Kong Bundy comes out to inside. Jake flips him off and attacks him, and Jim gets him on the ground, at which point Bundy enters and starts pounding on Jake. However, there's no DQ. We get this for a minute or two, and then suddenly Yokozuna comes out, and good lord. Look, when Yoko debuted in the WWF in 1992, he was billed at £500. Near the end of his run in 1996, he was about $650. He's billed that here, but honestly, I think he's closer to $750, the largest he has ever been. Yoko also flips off Bundy and joins in the fun. It is at this point that we get an announcement. This match is now a tag team match, with Bundy and Anvil taking on Jake and Yoko. Suddenly we see another person at ringside, a bald guy in a white shirt who looks a lot like King Kong Bundy. The commentators refer to him as Mini-Bundy. Now I'm going to quickly break off from the account to clear things up. Some say this guy was Bundy's manager at the time, and others say that this guy is Bill Stone, the head of Fostone Productions and guy in charge of this show. He's neither. This guy's name is Michael Henry, and he was working backstage at the show. We've actually seen him a couple of times already. He opened Tully Blanchard's car door, and he was trying to get OMG and Abby to the back after their bloodfest. And now he's the guy who you're going to be sympathising with today. Right, so this is now a tag match. I guess that Neidhart vs Roberts ended in a no contest, if it ever actually ended at all. For the next while we see Henry talking to both Bundy and Anvil outside. They look very angry, and he looks kind of out of his depth here. Jake looks utterly mortal, and Dutch Mantell says things like, I don't think he knows where he is, which are perhaps more pointed than they usually would be. Yoko merely stands in the corner. Henry's job is clearly to tell everyone what's going to go down. Finally, Anvil gets Jake outside of the ring and hits him with a couple of chair shots, and then Bundy does the same, and his chair shots were absolutely brutal, by the way. This serves to cover up Henry getting on the apron to talk to the referee, and I imagine to Yoko as well. Back in the ring, Anvil and Bundy take Jake's shoes off and beat him up with them. Jake is taking the brunt of the offence despite his state, perhaps wisely seeing as there's not much he can do but lie down. Bundy covers a couple of times, but Jake kicks out. This is followed by Bundy giving the ref evil eyes because he wants this over, like, right now. Finally, Jake low blows both Anvil and Bundy, and Yoko gets the hot tag. Yoko goes at Neidhart with punches and leans on him in the corner, but Bundy and Jake stay in the ring at the other corner. Seconds later, Bundy pushes Jake down and splashes him, and although Jake is not the legal man, the referee does a fast count and the match is mercifully over at 16:34, with the aborted Jake and Anvil singles match added on. Post-match, Bundy and the Anvil get out of Dodge as quickly as possible, but Yoko grabs Michael Henry. He wants Jake to do the DDT, but he is barely in condition to do anything. And so instead, Yoko runs poor Henry to the ropes and hits him with a Samoan drop, and then Jake lays Damien on him. As the commentators go over this and Jake continues to stumble around, the broadcast fades to black with Dutch in mid-sentence.
150-plus man right there, and little Bundy
is in desperate need
Wait a minute.
of help.
Wait a minute. Don't do it, Jake.
Oh, here comes the python.
Wait a minute. There he goes.
He laid the python on Little Bundy.
What if that snake ate that guy? What if he just started chewing him and, the snake's got a big belly after about 10 minutes?
I wouldn't want to be Little Bundy.
10 seconds later, we return to find Jake once again on the floor, and we get the closing logo. No proper sign-off or anything. It's over. It's done. Heroes of Wrestling is finished. Why the sudden fade to black? Well, the Fostone guys were quite worried because they had no frickin' idea what Jake was going to do next. Okay, those are the events that happened. And now we can get into the story behind this complete and utter train wreck of a main event. It is often said that Bundy and Yoko coming out and the match becoming a tag match was something that happened on the spur of the moment due to Jake's condition. However, this is only half true. It was always planned for this tag match to be the actual main event, the reason for this being that Bundy would not be able to do much of anything with Yokozuna due to his massive size. Yoko was about as mobile as the Iron Sheik at this point. Also, the Fostone people wanted to potentially save a proper Yoko-Bundy match for a future show instead of wrapping it up on the first, thus providing a hook for the second show if there was one. However, the Jake and Anvil match was planned to have a finish. Jake would go over clean with the DDT, then Bundy would attack, Yoko would come for the save, and we've got our tag match. However, there was a problem, and it wasn't yet Jake's condition. When Jim Neidhart came to the arena, 40 minutes before his match mind you, he refused to do the job to Jake Roberts. Why? Because at the time his relation, the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, had signed up to wrestle in the WWF again, and there was word that WWF were looking to bring Neidhart in on his side. Neidhart refused to do the job because he didn't want to look weak by losing on a pay-per-view so close to a potential WWF one, which, of course, never materialised. I would like to remind you that yes, wrestling is a scripted event and everybody knows this. But even so, some people just don't like to lose. So really, even as the match was scheduled to start, there didn't seem to even be an actual finish in place, and the reveal of Jake's condition only made it more of a catastrophe. When Jake made the odd decision to return to the back after coming out the first time, it was apparently to settle the argument by saying that he would job for Anvil. The tag match starting early without a finish to the singles match was inaudible because the Fostone team were horrified at Jake's condition and what he was doing out there. And then there's another problem. Both Bundy and Anvil absolutely did not want to have any kind of snake placed on them. And so, enter Michael Henry, just for having the misfortune to look like a miniature King Kong Bundy. Poor Michael Henry. He had to take the fall on this one, taking a Samoan drop from a 750-pound man, and then having a snake put on his face by a man who's ripped to the tits on Lord knows what. I don't even know if he was trained or not. I can find nothing out about this man. Speaking of which, before we get to the fallout of this show and the other events surrounding it, it's time to see where they all are now. King Kong Bundy continued to wrestle on the circuit until 2007, at which point he quietly retired. He occasionally does bits of acting and stand-up here and there. So, yeah, kind of normal, really. Jim Lee Anvil Neidhart's last match was recorded in 2016, and he made an appearance in a Battle Royal on War's 15th anniversary in 2008. He's also occasionally had run-ins with the Law. His daughter, Natalie Neidhart, currently competes in WWE as Natalya, and is also featured on Total Divas, meaning that the Anvils made the odd appearance on that show. Next we come to the story of Yokozuna, real name Rodney Anoa'i of the famous Samoan wrestling family. The former two-time WWF champion largely stopped competing for the Fed in late 1996 due to issues with his weight. 650 pounds at the time, the Fed wanted him to get back down to 500, as despite his size he was considered a very valuable asset, a locker room leader who, if he was to get down to 500, would have likely retained his place in the main event. Yoko tried, but wasn't able to get down to a weight that would clear him to compete in certain states, and he was quietly released. On the Indies, Yoko decided he would become the heaviest wrestler ever with a goal weight between 850 and 900 pounds. He was 760 at Heroes of Wrestling. At some point he seems to have been dissuaded from this and began to lose weight again. In October 2000 he went on a European indie tour taking him to the UK, where he was interviewed on the Channel 4 morning show The Big Breakfast. Sadly, a few days after this, on October 23rd, Yokozuna passed away in his Liverpool hotel room due to a pulmonary edema, aged 34. In 2012, he was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame by the Usos and Rikishi, his cousins. And finally, we get to Jake Roberts. This is, of course, his lowest public moment. Jake's battle with his personal demons continued through the 2000s. In 2001, he moved to England, where he spent a couple of years on the Indies, but he left in 2004 after reportedly allowing a snake to starve to death in his garage. He got clean after this thanks to a WWE paid stint in rehab and appeared on WWE programming, promoting a DVD that he had helped make. He also appeared on TNA during this time. However, not long after this, drink and drugs would take him once more. Finally, in 2012, he reached out to ex-wrestler Diamond Dallas Page and moved into his house. With DDP's help, Jake was finally able to conquer his demons and get back into shape. There's been a few blips, but that is where he remains, virtually drug and alcohol-free for the past 5 years. He made a triumphant return at the end of the January 2014 Old School War, laying a python on Dean Ambrose, and was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in the same year by DDP. Despite also having a couple of struggles with cancer, he won both of them, he last wrestled a match in 2016 and has recently embarked upon a spoken word tour. His journey to recovery was documented in The Resurrection of Jake the Snake. And this is one story that does, at least, have a happy ending. In the days after Heroes of Wrestling, both the Wrestling Observer and the Pro Wrestling Torch had plenty to say about the event that was immediately dubbed the worst pay-per-view of all time, along with a whole bunch of news. I sure have them to thank for this section. First off, the plan for Heroes of Wrestling was to do a second show in February 2000, along with 2 more shows in the year, and perhaps even follow that up with a weekly TV show. This was, of course, dependent on hitting that 40,000 target for the first show. Alas, Heroes of Wrestling didn't make it. In the end, it only scored 29,000 buys. As a result of this, Heroes of Wrestling would end up being one and done. This is their first and last show. It was generally agreed on by the Sheiks that Jim Neidhart behaved like a complete arsehole with regards to refusing the job to Jake. He also refused to be paid by cheque and complained he was being screwed and wanted a guarantee that he would be used on the next show, even though there was no guarantee there would even be a next one. Several wrestlers tried to talk him around, including George Steele, but he had none of it. In the aftermath, the wrestlers were largely sympathetic with Roberts and utterly livid at Neidhart, while Fosstone were angry with Jake and fearing a backlash from pay-per-view carriers. If there was another event, Fosstone would have most definitely not booked either Neidhart or Roberts for it. One of the big things that came out after the show was how little the Fosstone people knew about wrestling. I already told you about the fake blood thing. Their research for the show consisted of watching a few old tapes and attending several independent events as well as an ECW show. They were kind of out of the loop and believed that the likes of Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkoff were still big stars and were desperate to book them. The ECW show also made them want a match for that crowd, which is why OMG vs Abdullah was booked. Thanks to this, they also made a completely ridiculous request of Jimmy Snuka. They wanted the 56-year-old Snuka with shot knees to do the Superfly leap on Bob Orton to the outside through an inside table. Snuka's response to this can probably be summed up by rearranging the words off and fuck. The most ridiculous thing, however, was that apparently a member of the production team asked one of the show's bookers for a copy of the wrestler's move-for-move script before the show. So yes, that's how much understanding they had of wrestling in a nutshell. I would love to be that booker, trying to think of the right answer to that particular question. Now you might wonder if there were some other people who were booked for the show at some point but ended up not doing it. And yes, there were. Sid Vicious verbally agreed to be on the show, but cancelled after signing a contract with WCW. Vader was also contacted about the show, but couldn't make it. A shame, seeing as he was main eventing for All Japan Pro Wrestling at the time, won the Triple Crown twice, and was one of the best wrestlers of the whole year. Also, he had a clause in his All Japan contract that he couldn't job in the United States, which apparently warned Fosstone off of him. Despite being unable to do commentary, Gordon Soley did offer by fax to come to the show and wave to the crowd, but was told to stay home. The legendary Nick Bockwinkel was also supposed to be a part of the show, but apparently dropped out of contact with Fosstone after the pay-per-view commercials. Bock was a smart man and probably saw what was coming. Finally, the Honky Tonk Man was booked for the show. However, he objected to its original name, Legends of Wrestling, as did several others because they felt it made them look like old has-beens. Even after the name was changed, Honky pulled out because he thought the show would hurt his reputation. To be fair, he was probably right. There are other little stories about the show. Too Cold Scorpio majorly regretted taking the booking after seeing exactly what the show was, and on reflection it's clear just how out of place he and Julio Fantastico are there. The Fosstone people absolutely loved Captain Lou Albano because they knew him and he really sucked up to them, but the wrestlers despised him for getting himself over and no one else. Captain Lou was at one point going to colour commentate with Randy Rosenbloom, but the wrestlers protested so much that Dutch Mantell ended up in the spot, which was undoubtedly for the best. Apparently a bunch of the wrestlers were so desperate for money that they only requested their usual small indie fee for the show, and Jake Roberts apparently tore up his initial check out of anger and disappointment at himself before finally accepting one.
Right, here's something new that wasn't in the original version of this vid. Not long after I first released this video in 2017, someone reached out to me. Michael Henry. Yes, the almighty Mini King Kong Bundy, who's all over this card, busting his ass to the extreme, and I've been meaning for years to add in some of the insight that he gave me. So just who is Michael Henry? Well, at this time he was Yokozuna's assistant and close friend. Indeed, pretty much they were super tight friends in the business. He'd known Yoko for years, and you can bet that he was absolutely safe as hell when he did that Samoan drop. In the midst of the chaos, Bill Stone wanted Jake to give Henry the DDT in the main event, but Yoko absolutely nixed it in the ring because Henry had basically never taken a bump in his life. He had a lot of other cool insights, such as the production meeting where Randy Rosenbloom was introduced as the play-by-play. 5 minutes after Bill said that Randy was born to do this show, he was asked by Mike and Paul Adams what he knew about wrestling, and Randy admitted that he hadn't watched it in about 20 years. When Mike relayed this back to Dutch Mantell, his words were, and I quote, "Are you fucking kidding me, Fester?" And from there they had 24 hours to try and teach the guy something. Everyone actually pushed for Michael St. John to be the play-by-play, seeing as he had a ton more experience and actually knew wrestling, but Bill was insistent on Randy. Here's another great bit of chaos that happened during the show. After their bout, it seems as though the Wild Samoans retreated to the hotel buffet. I think that what you should picture here is Homer Simpson at the Flying Dutchman, because they absolutely destroyed it. Mid-show, Bill Stone gets on the headset to ask if anyone can go to the buffet and take care of the Samoans, because they're basically eating everything in sight. To which Michael St. John's response was, and I quote, "Are you fucking kidding me?" That appears to have been a bit of a mantra for the show. Speaking of Michael St. John, he's only really known for being the backstage interviewer when it comes to this show. However, he was a Marine in the back too, responsible for booking all the talent. And there should also be a lot more credit given to Paul Adams, who was also heavily involved. They all worked their asses off, gave the people in charge exactly what they wanted, for better or worse. They also pushed heavily for Scorpio vs Fantastico to be on the show, even though Bill didn't particularly want it. They simply wanted something that would be halfway decent because, well, while almost all of the booked wrestlers were professional and lovely, they couldn't really go. Another great quote. During his crash training, Randy was making up his board of quotes and came up with this gem. Julio Fantastico is to wrestling what Michael Jordan is to basketball. Apparently Randy thought this was going to be his best line of the night. When Dutch Mantell heard about this from Mike, he asked if there was any possible way that he could get him a ticket back to Las Vegas. Anyway, me and Mike had a great chat. He corroborated a lot of the detail and added plenty more, and so I thought it should be included here. Thanks so much, Mike. And now, back to myself from 5 years previously to start wrapping things up.
Finally, there's one more account from Bill Stone himself, who spoke about the show to a wrestling site many years later, and also for the Review Away podcast on live action wrestling. He freely admits that he didn't know all that much about the workings of wrestling going in, and that as the show went on he felt further and further out of his depth, When it came to things like the main event, he frankly didn't have much of a clue what to do. He says that he was happy with 90% of the people who worked on the card, and there were only a couple who he couldn't stand. He says that he felt that he did a bad job, that in the end the buck stopped with him, and that Heroes of Wrestling was a very humbling experience, and that at the end of the show he made sure to shake all of the wrestlers' hands and thank them for their time, before resolving to never do another wrestling event ever again. In the 18 years since Heroes of Wrestling, Bill Stone has stuck to that resolutely. He has nothing but respect for the wrestlers and the business, and wishes that he could have given the wrestling public a lot more.
It was an interesting event to put together, and learned a lot from it. I wish I would have serviced the wrestling community better. It's something that, it's not the highlight of my career because our execution of the event itself wasn't as good as the wrestling fans deserved. But it was something that we put a lot of effort in at the time, that's for sure.
Since Heroes of Wrestling, Bill Stone has continued to work in the TV sports industry as a part of CBS's College Sports Network. Randy Rosenblum has also continued to commentate on various sports over the years, and is no doubt much more comfortable doing that as opposed to professional wrestling. Michael St. John was a wrestling announcer by trade for various small southern promotions, and would continue to do this afterwards. And as for Dirty Dutch Mantell? Mantell has had a long career as a booker, manager and wrestler, mostly behind the scenes. He was in TNA for much of the 2000s as a writer, producer and agent. In 2013 he returned to the WWE, where he played Uncle Zebekiah in the mid-90s, and became Zeb Coulter, manager and pundit for the likes of Jack Swagger, Cesaro and Alberto Del Rio. He stayed there until 2016, and recently he's returned to TNA, or GFW as they are now, as the head of the creative team. He is often regarded as one of the best minds in the wrestling business, and one wonders why on earth they didn't just have him book the show. Okay, so, let's review. The best thing to do perhaps is to break down what went right and what went wrong. Let's start with people and things that came out of this with something resembling credit. The promotion. I would say that Fosstone did do a very good job of promoting this show, and I feel that their heart was at least in the right place, nor did they at all try to screw anyone, which is more than can be said for a lot of wrestling promoters. In the end, they were fishes out of water. There's certainly no reason to have any ill feelings towards Bill Stone. While they fell short of 40,000 buys, the point has been made that 29,000 buys is more than what most of Impact Wrestling's shows pull today. There are some wrestlers too who deserve a note. Marty Jannetty did his damnedest to carry the first match of the card, and he was in by far the best shape of anyone on this show. Too Cold Scorpio and Julio Fantastico's match may not have been great, but it was at least something different. Even Bushwhacker Luke, as part of possibly the worst match of all time, tried to carry the match by selling for basically all of it. Tully, Blanchard and Stan Lane both did a great job, and Blanchard cut a promo that this show did not deserve. Finally, Bob Orton could have perhaps done better with another opponent. If there's one man backstage who deserves a lot of credit, well, it's got to be my boy Michael Henry, the man who was put in a thoroughly impossible position only to be draped with a massive frickin' snake. Poor guy. And I went back and forth on this one, but I will give some credit to Dirty Dutch Mantell. Look, the commentary on this show is terrible, and yes, Mantell spends most of the time bickering with his partner. But he still tries to put things over the best he can without being beyond a joke about it. And consider that the alternative was Captain Lou Albano. I think I'd much rather have Dutch, to be honest. And now, of course, we have to move on to those negatives. Naturally, there are quite a lot of them. First off, the production. The technical values on this show were beyond the pale, and they're easily the worst thing about it. You've got sound that constantly goes in and out, cameras that are always out of position, a complete lack of cues, endless moves that were missed by the production truck, the inexplicable cuts to bored-looking people in the crowd who are clearly having a shit time, and that fricking casino magic sign in the win that falls down about 2 matches in and nobody bothers to put back up again. It's a total debacle, as Vince McMahon would say. Captain Lou Albano. He just seems to be everywhere on this damn card, and it's certainly not better for it. Sure, it's amusing to listen to him jabber on during the Julio vs Scorpio match, but he just walked down there before he was due to and didn't give a shit. Whenever he put over something that wasn't himself, he sounded phenomenally insincere. When he was out managing for the Orton vs Snuka match, he was more interested in pointing out the manager of Casino Magic than doing what he was supposed to be doing, and he was apparently a ridiculous kiss-ass backstage to the point where the wrestlers almost all hated him. Not a good show. Randy Rosenblum. I almost feel bad for this, as the guy was probably put in a ridiculous position at the 11th hour to commentate on something he had no experience whatsoever in. Still, the commentary is a big reason why the show's as bad as it is. It's not that he's a bad guy or anything, but he just flat out shouldn't have been there. Paul Adams. Just not the greatest start to a show ever. In general, all the managers were very bad, and one wonders why on earth Fosstone didn't try to get any manager in who might have had some kind of name value instead of, I don't know, Honest John Cheatham. The unknown managers do kind of cheapen the card somewhat. As for the wrestlers themselves, I mean, look, I could name a lot of them. Volkoff, Sheik, Hammer, Snuka, Steele, but it would all be the same thing, that these guys couldn't go anymore and should retire when it's likely that most of them couldn't retire anyway due to money situations. And by all accounts, they mostly acted like pros backstage. Just because they couldn't go doesn't make them a full-on negative. There are a few, though, who certainly do deserve special recognition. Abdullah the Butcher. Just, yes, the match did get over because a bloodfest always does, but considering what we now know about the guy, the hepatitis C and all that, the sight of him fishhooking one-man gang with that fork makes me want to throw up. He's just a rather nasty piece of work, and he really shouldn't have been doing what he was doing at all. Jim the Anvil Neidhart. What a total piece of shit this guy is. He turns up late, refuses to do the match he's been booked to do, acts like a total prima donna because he thinks that Titan's going to call him soon, holds up the promoter over a check, threatens to walk out, and refuses to listen to any kind of reason whatsoever. A stupid asshole in every sense of the word, and happily the WWE were not going to be calling his dumbass anytime soon. Yokozuna. Yeah, that's kind of a sad one because he was not in a good spot at this time at all. Yoko is one of the most underrated big men of all time, but this is a sad sight. This negative is more based on that Yoko should not have been booked to appear at all. You've got a guy here who is deemed unfit to perform in several states because of his weight, and he's openly admitting to getting bigger. He didn't need a booking, he needed help. Booking Yoko was an utterly stupid risk to take. And finally, of course, Jake the Snake Roberts. There's not much to say here than what has already been said, of course. This is the career low of the Snake, and his performance is the main thing that people remember on this card. And yet, despite his condition and the concerns of others, there were still people enabling it and saying that everything was just fine, which again kinda turns my stomach. At least Jake got out of it, because Lord knows a lot of people don't. October 10th, 1999 then, is a day that will live in infamy for wrestling fans. Obviously, we all know what the deal is with wrestling. The art of kayfabe, of making out that everything in wrestling is real, has been dead for many years. Still, one wonders how many folks ordered this show with the intention of reliving their childhood with names they remembered, only to be shocked at seeing what these former superstars had become. In many ways, Heroes of Wrestling is one of the most candid glimpses you can find of the reality behind professional wrestling's curtain. It was far from the first show that was based around promoting legends, and it was far from the last. There have been many. Some have taken place largely without incident, and there's undoubtedly some which were just as bad if not worse. But due to the scale of the production and the events that played out for the whole world to see, Heroes of Wrestling will always have a special place. As for Casino Magic, in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, the riverboat casino resort that played host to this event, it isn't there anymore. In 2005, it was almost totally destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. The gaming barge ended up in a forest 7 miles away. There is still a casino resort on the site, mind you, one which is held up by foundations as opposed to water. Despite the damage caused by Katrina, the resort reopened under a new name the very next year. I do not know the fate of the ballroom where this event took place. But how many people there still remember it? Maybe there's a bartender dishing out old fashions and telling somebody that they once saw a drunken wrestler writhing around in the middle of the ring, kissing the head of a snake that he'd hired for the evening. And then the guy he's serving asks if the bartender's got that snake's number. Who knows?